Hurricane Katrina tore in from the Gulf of Mexico like a wrathful sea god and made landfall in New Orleans. I was there, pulling a 12-hour rotation at the hospital where I was employed as a member of the emergency response team. That was a long, sleepless night, much of it spent wrapped in dread, waiting to see if that raw elemental fury would breach our fragile shelter. It didn't, and by morning the storm had passed, leaving us with a damaged, partially functional facility and a ruined, flooded city. The Riverbend neighborhood I lived in was among the flooded, so for the foreseeable future, the hospital became my home. Existence there quickly became an unpredictable mix of absolute tedium, punctuated by spells of utter mania, careening from boredom to crisis management and back again with little warning. I would work my 12-hour shift, volunteer a few off hours to helping sort and ID the waterlogged bodies of drowning victims the city was bringing into our morgue, and grab whatever sleep I could in the unused OBGYN exam room I'd staked out as a makeshift dormitory. When I ate, it was usually a cold meal out of a can. Days felt like weeks, and weeks felt like months. I quickly became numb to everything. It was like existing in the second act of a David Lynch film. After prolonged exposure has reduced the horrifying and surreal weirdness to a banal part of everyday life. One evening, I stood on the hospital roof and watched the cherry blossom of a chemical storage warehouse exploding in the distance. And all I could think was, well, that happened. Without regular access to TV and radio, and no fucking sign of FEMA whatsoever, we depended on the police and paramedics visiting our emergency room for news of what was happening in the city. Sitting 5 feet below sea level, New Orleans has always had a tenuous armistice with the surrounding environment, wary of the Mississippi River and the local swampland, even as it remained economically dependent on them. Hurricane Katrina shattered this uneasy peace, and when those infamous levees breached, many of the animal species living on the other side were washed in with the floodwaters. Countless swamp creatures suddenly finding themselves city folk. The drowned bodies in our morgue frequently showed signs of partial consumption, and reports abounded of snake and nutria sightings. On one occasion, a police officer showed us video footage on his cell phone of a bull shark casually swimming down the flooded lanes of Jefferson Highway. While I knew my neighborhood was among the flooded, the exact status of my apartment was unknown, and it was over a week before the waters had receded enough that I could risk venturing out to ascertain for myself. This I finally did late one morning, driven by a morbid curiosity about exactly how much of my life had washed away, and an extremely urgent need to requisition clean underwear. Even then, I still had to park the better part of a mile away and travel the remaining distance on foot. The brackish, stagnant floodwaters quickly rising from ankle depth to waist height as walking became wading. Now, I'd made that trek plenty of times in the past, heading down to my favorite Lebanese restaurant for a kebab dinner, seeking respite from a humid evening with a cold beer at the local dive bar. Normally, it would have only taken me a few minutes. That time it took me almost an hour, and it was a hellish hour. See, the neighborhood hadn't just flooded, it had been devastated. Huge ancient oak and cypress trees had been uprooted and shattered by the winds. Their remains scattered in the street as obstacles to be navigated over or around. In some places, the tree litter was so high, I couldn't see the houses I knew were on the other side. The Lebanese restaurant's door had been kicked in, and the dive bar no longer had a roof. Everything was unnaturally quiet, and that stillness was more frightening than any physical destruction I could see. There was no birdsong whatsoever, no croaking frogs from the river. While there was no living sign of the numerous stray cats who frequented the neighborhood, I did pass the drowned corpses of several cats and dogs, and a few other things I did not get close enough to confirm were actually animals. Of my neighbors, there was no sign. It was like journeying into a nightmare version of my life, where the familiar and comfortable had become alien and dangerous. Anything not presenting an immediate threat was simply another entry in the mental catalog of horrors I was compiling, to be filed away and processed later. And it was hot, over 95 degrees with humidity to match, and the air still as a graveyard. That kind of oppressive greenhouse heat that smothers you like a wet towel. The worst of all was the water. Oh, how it stank. I've never smelled anything like it before or since. A pungent miasma of rot and decay and waste and who knows what else. When I think back to this time, that smell is the first thing to hit me. I remember how the drowned bodies in the hospital morgue had been suffused with it. The stench rising from flesh softened to the texture of damp tissue paper and stained an unrecognizable color. I think about how those people, caught up in it, must have felt during their last moments as it rose up around them. I waded onwards, step by cautious step, wary for potholes and other hidden dangers. Several times I lost my footing and nearly went under. Finally, after an exhausting trudge through the wasteland my neighborhood had become, I made it to my street. I could see my building less than a block away, relief taking hold of me at the sight of it. Here, amidst all of the chaos, was finally something which felt familiar. My home! And with just one last fallen cypress trunk in my way, I'd soon be back inside it. I hauled myself onto the fallen tree and eagerly splashed over the other side. Which is exactly when 3 feet of toothy reptile erupted from the water and latched itself mouth first onto my arm. My attacker was a juvenile alligator mississippiensis, the American alligator, likely plucked from some swamp or gator farm by the hurricane and attacking more out of fear and desperation than hostility. But whatever intellectual conclusions I reached after the fact, in the moment, my response was far more primal. Oh, fuck! Reflexively yanking my injured limb, and my arm, mercifully still attached to my body, tore free from the animal's mouth. I stumbled backwards slightly, sloshing up to my chest in the floodwater before righting myself. And that's when the goddamn thing came at me again. Jaws wide and hissing, it lunged at me for another bite. I couldn't swim or run away. There was no higher ground to climb to. Unarmed, wounded, unable to flee, I instinctively took the only option available to me in that moment. I punched it. Just once, pivoting and striking downward with my uninjured right. My fist connected near one of the eyes, hard enough that the force of the impact reverberated up my arm and into my body. The gator slipped under the water with the blow and didn't resurface. I didn't stick around to see if it would. Sloshing my way across the remaining distance and scurrying up the stairs to my front door. It was only once safely inside that I took a look at the injury. My arm was slick with blood, and the skin was badly lacerated, but the wound appeared largely superficial. By chance, the bite pressure hadn't broken the bone, and all of my fingers still wiggled normally. I felt no real pain, either due to adrenaline or because near constant exposure to trauma had by that point inured me to it. I don't know which. All I could do was look at the bite and bemusedly think, well, that happened. I cleaned and bandaged the wound as best I could with a home first aid kit, conducted a quick inventory of the damage to my residence, and packed a duffel with some much-needed spare clothes. Without running water or electricity and no way of summoning aid, my apartment wasn't safe to remain in, so I headed back to the safety of the hospital. I kept a sharp eye out for movement in the water during the return journey, keenly aware that my blood might attract other critters. Luckily, this time I was unmolested by beast or man. At the hospital, the attending ER surgeon stitched me up carefully, and I received full-spectrum injections of antibiotics and an IV saline drip as a precaution against dehydration. There is no gossip in this world like a bored nurse in the Deep South. And by sundown that day, I was hearing my own story narrated back to me as a tall tale by medical staff and patients alike. Did y'all hear about the guy who was bit by the alligator? Oh, I wish he'd killed it and brought it back. That's good eating. To each of these inquiries, I would simply raise my bandaged arm and say, why, yes, I had heard that story. Eventually, I salvaged what I could from my damaged apartment and moved back home to San Diego to rebuild my life, mourn the friends I'd learned had not survived, and deal with the various scars the experience has left me with. For years afterwards, I was prone to morose moods whenever it rained, and I still wrestle with a profound depression every year on the anniversary. Occasionally, a page from that mental catalog of horrors tears itself free from my subconscious and pops up in my dreams. I bear no animus towards the alligator that attacked me, nor have I developed any sort of pathological phobia about reptiles. You're goddamn right, I love them. That animal was as much a victim of the storm as I was, isolated and afraid, doing what was necessary to survive. That's just animal nature. What I do bear from that encounter is a set of scars shaped like a V in the skin of my left forearm, which have remained a daily reminder of the trauma of those weeks, indelibly written into my flesh and within sight every waking hour. The 10th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina came around this past August, and I marked the occasion by having those scars tattooed over. An artist friend custom designed a Utahraptor, one of my favorite dinosaurs, for me. Sleek, feathered, fierce, reclaiming my body with a totemic set of teeth and claws of my very own. It's easy to view scarring as the mark of an experience which damaged or diminished the bearer, but I choose a different perspective. They are the evidence of what we are strong enough to survive. Scar tissue is tougher than unbroken skin. We take that damage, incorporate it into ourselves, and grow more resilient from it as we fight on through the rest of our lives. And there's nothing diminishing about that. It too is just animal nature. Thank you.
It's his first time on the VAMP stage, Matt Baldwin.